Shaquille O'Neal pays touching tribute to Coach, who believed in him when nobody else would. Are you ready to witness one of the most emotional tributes in sports history? Today, you're going to discover how Shaquille O'Neal honored a coach who saw greatness in him during his darkest moment, when everyone else had written him off as a failed prospect. This is a story about unwavering faith, second chances, and how one person's belief can change the trajectory of an entire life. If this story moves you the way it should, please hit that like button right now, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications because moments like this remind us of the profound impact that believing in someone can have on their future. Now, let's witness this deeply personal and heartwarming tribute that brought an entire arena to tears. The atmosphere at the Staples Center was electric as the Los Angeles Lakers prepared to retire Shaquille O'Neal's jersey number. Thousands of fans filled the arena, celebrities occupied courtside seats, and former teammates had flown in from around the world to honor one of basketball's greatest players. But as Shaq stood at the podium, microphone in hand, he was about to surprise everyone with an announcement that nobody saw coming. "Before we officially retire number 34, Shaq began, his voice carrying across the packed arena, "I need to share something with all of you. I need to tell you about a man who made this night possible. A man who believed in me when I had given everyone else every reason to stop believing." The crowd grew quiet, sensing that this wasn't going to be a typical retirement ceremony speech. Most of you know the story of my success: LSU, Orlando, Lakers championships, business empire. But what you don't know is that there was a moment when my basketball career almost ended before it really began. There was a time when I was ready to quit, when I thought I wasn't good enough, when everyone around me agreed that maybe basketball wasn't for me. Murmurs rippled through the audience. This was not the narrative they expected to hear about one of the most dominant players in NBA history. I was 16 years old, a junior in high school, and I was a mess, Shaq continued, his voice growing more emotional. I was 6'10", but couldn't make a layup consistently. I was strong, but had no coordination. I was tall, but had no basketball IQ. I'd been cut from my sophomore team, and every coach who saw me play said the same thing. "He's too clumsy, too awkward, too raw. He'll never amount to anything in basketball." The arena was completely silent. Now, hanging on every word. I was about to quit. I was about to focus on academics and forget about basketball entirely. And then I met Coach Samuel Washington at a summer camp in San Antonio, a man who would change my life by doing something no other coach had done. He saw potential where everyone else saw problems. Shaq paused, visibly emotional. "Coach Washington is here tonight, and I want everyone to meet the man who saved my career by refusing to give up on a kid that nobody else wanted." A spotlight illuminated an elderly black man sitting in the front row, tears already streaming down his face. Coach Samuel Washington, now 78 years old, stood slowly and waved to the crowd, clearly overwhelmed by the public recognition. "Coach Washington," Shaq continued, "I know you're going to be embarrassed by what I'm about to say, but it's time the world knew what you did for me. It's time everyone understood that behind every success story, there's usually someone who believed when belief seemed impossible." The crowd began to applaud, but Shaq held up his hand. "Let me tell you the real story first, then you can decide if this man deserves your applause." In the summer of 1988, I was at a basketball camp that my stepfather had forced me to attend. I didn't want to be there. I was embarrassed, frustrated, and convinced that I was wasting everyone's time. On the second day of camp, during a scrimmage, I missed 7 shots in a row, fouled out in 15 minutes, and had 3 turnovers. The other coaches were shaking their heads. Some of the kids were laughing. Shaq's voice cracked slightly. I walked off that court knowing I was done with basketball. I sat on the bleachers, put my head in my hands, and started crying. That's when Coach Washington sat down next to me. The arena was so quiet that every person could hear the emotion in Shaq's voice. This man who barely knew me, who had watched me fail spectacularly for 2 days, sat down and said something that changed my life forever. He said, "Son, I've been coaching for 30 years, and I can see something in you that you can't see in yourself. You're not failing because you're not good enough. You're failing because you don't believe you're good enough. But I believe in you, and I'm going to prove it to you." The crowd was completely captivated, many with tears in their eyes as they realized they were witnessing one of the most personal moments in sports history. Coach Washington spent the rest of that camp working with me individually after hours when everyone else had gone home. He didn't just teach me basketball fundamentals, he taught me to believe in myself. He saw past my awkwardness to my potential. He saw past my failures to my future. Shaq looked directly at Coach Washington, who was now openly weeping. "Sir, you saved more than my basketball career that summer. You saved my belief in myself. You taught me that potential isn't about where you are, it's about where you're going. And you taught me that sometimes all a person needs is one person who refuses to give up on them." If you're already feeling the emotion of this moment, please take a second to hit that like button. What Shaq reveals next about Coach Washington's impact will touch your heart even more deeply. As the arena remained captivated by Shaq's heartfelt introduction, he continued to paint the picture of that transformative summer in 1988, when a struggling teenager met the coach who would change his destiny. I want you all to understand just how bad I was at basketball when Coach Washington met me, Shaq said with a self-deprecating smile. I mean, I was impressively bad. Picture a 6'10", 250-pound kid who moved like he was wearing cement shoes and had hands made of concrete. The crowd chuckled, but there was warmth in their laughter, not mockery. The first thing Coach Washington did was pull me aside after that disastrous scrimmage. But instead of giving me a lecture about effort or technique, he asked me a question that no coach had ever asked. "Shaquille, why do you want to play basketball?" Shaq paused, remembering that pivotal moment. I told him the truth, that I didn't really want to play basketball anymore, that I was only there because my stepfather thought it would be good for me, that I was tired of being embarrassed, tired of being the kid everyone laughed at. And do you know what Coach Washington said to that? He said, "Good. Now we can start working on the real problem. The real problem isn't your footwork or your shooting, it's that you're playing someone else's dream instead of your own. Let's figure out if basketball is your dream, and if it is, let's make you good enough to achieve it." Coach Washington wiped his eyes from his seat in the front row, clearly reliving those memories alongside Shaq. For the next 3 weeks of that camp, Coach Washington worked with me every single day. Not just during regular camp hours, but for 2 hours after everyone else went home. He didn't charge my family extra money. He didn't ask for anything in return. He just believed that I was worth the investment of his time and energy. But here's what made Coach Washington different from every other coach I'd met, Shaq continued, his voice growing stronger with admiration. He didn't just work on my basketball skills. He worked on my confidence, my understanding of the game, my belief in myself. Every mistake I made, he'd say, "That's not failure, that's information. Now, let's use that information to get better." The crowd was completely engaged, many leaning forward in their seats. I'll never forget the breakthrough moment. It was the third week of camp, and we were working on post moves. I'd been struggling with a simple hook shot for days, missing everything, getting more and more frustrated. Finally, I threw the ball against the wall and said, "I can't do this. I'm never going to be good at this." Coach Washington picked up the ball, walked over to me, and said something I'll remember for the rest of my life. "Shaquille, the difference between good players and great players isn't talent. It's the willingness to fail your way to success. You're going to miss 1,000 shots before you make 100. But those 100 makes will matter more than the 1,000 misses if you keep shooting." Shaq's voice grew more emotional. Then he stood there and rebounded for me while I shot hook shots for another hour. Didn't say another word, just rebounded and passed the ball back. He was teaching me persistence without preaching about it. By the end of that camp, something had changed, not just in my skills, though those had improved dramatically, but in my mindset. I started to believe that maybe I could be good at this. Maybe I could develop into a real basketball player. But the most important thing Coach Washington taught me had nothing to do with basketball, Shaq continued. He taught me that everyone deserves someone who believes in them, especially when they don't believe in themselves. He showed me what real mentorship looks like. Not just teaching skills, but building character and confidence. Shaq looked directly at Coach Washington again. "Sir, what you did for me that summer wasn't just coaching. It was life-changing mentorship. You didn't just make me a better basketball player. You made me a better person. Someone who understood the responsibility that comes with success. Someone who knew that I had an obligation to help others the way you helped me." The crowd began to applaud, but Shaq wasn't finished. After that camp ended, Coach Washington didn't disappear from my life. He stayed in touch throughout my senior year of high school, offering encouragement and advice. When college recruiters started showing interest, he helped me understand what to look for in a program. When I struggled with the pressure of recruitment, he reminded me of how far I'd come. Even when I got to LSU, Coach Washington would call me after games, not just the good games, but especially after the difficult ones. He'd remind me of that awkward 16-year-old who couldn't make a layup, and he'd tell me how proud he was of the young man I was becoming. Shaq's voice broke slightly. Throughout my entire professional career, through championships and failures, through trades and retirements, Coach Washington has been a constant source of wisdom and support. He's attended every major milestone in my life: my NBA debut, my wedding, my children's births, my Hall of Fame induction. But he's never asked for anything in return, never wanted credit, never sought publicity, never tried to use our relationship for his own benefit. He's just been there, a steady presence reminding me of where I came from and why it matters to help others along the way. The emotion in the arena was palpable as thousands of people realized they were witnessing a master class in gratitude and the power of mentorship. "Ladies and gentlemen," Shaq said, his voice now strong with purpose, "Coach Samuel Washington represents everything that's good about sports, about mentorship, about human kindness. He saw potential in a kid that nobody else wanted, and he invested his time, energy, and heart into helping that kid become everything he could be." As Shaq's tribute continued, the entire arena felt the profound weight of witnessing something truly special. Not just the retirement of a jersey, but a testament to the power of one person's unwavering belief in another. "Coach Washington," Shaq said, turning to address his mentor directly, "I need you to come up here with me. What I have to say next, I want to say to your face, in front of all these people who need to understand what real mentorship looks like." Coach Washington slowly made his way to the stage, aided by a walking cane but moving with the dignity of a man who had spent his life building up others. When he reached Shaq, the size difference was striking. The 7'1" former player towering over his 5'8" mentor. But there was no question about who commanded the most respect in that moment. "Coach," Shaq said, his voice thick with emotion, "I brought you up here because I want everyone to see the man who taught me that success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about what you make possible for others." He turned to the crowd. After that transformative summer camp, Coach Washington could have just moved on to the next group of kids. But that's not who he is. For the past 35 years, he's continued working with young people who others have written off. Kids from broken homes, kids who've been cut from teams, kids who've been told they're not good enough. Do you want to know what Coach Washington has been doing since he helped save my career? He's been saving other careers, other dreams, other lives. He's worked with over 3,000 young people in his community basketball programs. Not all of them became professional athletes. Most didn't. But all of them became better people because someone took the time to believe in them. Shaquille stood humbly beside Shaq, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, but deeply moved by the public recognition. "Coach, tell them about Marcus," Shaq prompted gently. Coach Washington took the microphone with slightly shaking hands. When he spoke, his voice was soft but clear, carrying the wisdom of decades spent nurturing young potential. "Marcus was a 15-year-old who came to my program 3 years ago," he began. "He'd been arrested twice, was failing school, and everyone said he was headed for trouble. But I saw the same thing in Marcus that I saw in Shaquille all those years ago. A young person who had lost faith in himself. The arena was completely silent, captivated by this soft-spoken man's words. Marcus couldn't shoot, couldn't dribble well, but he had heart. So we worked together, just like Shaquille and I worked together. Not just on basketball, but on discipline, respect, goal setting, believing in himself. Today, Marcus is a sophomore at Texas A&M on an academic scholarship. He's studying engineering and wants to build schools in underserved communities. Basketball didn't make him successful. The character he developed through basketball did." The crowd erupted in applause, and Coach Washington smiled modestly. "That's what Coach Washington does," Shaq said, taking back the microphone. "He doesn't just teach basketball. He uses basketball to teach life. He doesn't just develop players. He develops human beings." "But here's what makes this man truly extraordinary," Shaq continued. "Every success story from his programs, he celebrates, as if it were his own child. Every kid who graduates from high school, every young person who gets a job, every life that gets turned around. Coach Washington considers that his greatest victory." Shaq placed his massive hand gently on Coach Washington's shoulder. "Sir, you taught me that true success is measured not by what you accomplish, but by what you make possible for others. You've made possible thousands of success stories, thousands of second chances, thousands of lives lived with purpose and dignity. Which brings me to the real reason I asked Coach Washington to join me tonight," Shaq said, turning back to the audience. "I'm not just retiring my jersey tonight. I'm announcing the establishment of the Samuel Washington Foundation for Youth Development." The crowd gasped in surprise and then erupted in thunderous applause. "This foundation," Shaq continued, when the noise died down, "will ensure that Coach Washington's approach to mentorship continues long after he's no longer able to run programs himself. We're committing $10 million to create youth development centers in underserved communities across the country, all based on Coach Washington's model of using sports to teach life skills and build character." Coach Washington looked stunned. tears streaming down his face. "But that's not all," Shaq said with a grin. "Coach, you've spent 45 years giving to others. It's time someone gave back to you. The foundation is also purchasing your family a new home, establishing a retirement fund to ensure you're financially secure, and creating an endowment in your name at the University of Texas to fund scholarships for students from underprivileged backgrounds." The arena erupted again, but Coach Washington was now sobbing openly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the gesture. "Coach Washington," Shaq said, kneeling down to be closer to his mentor's eye level, "you saved my life by believing in me when no one else would. Now, I want to make sure your legacy of belief continues to save other lives for generations too. Come." The two men embraced, and there wasn't a dry eye in the arena. This wasn't just a jersey retirement ceremony anymore. It had become a celebration of the transformative power of mentorship, belief, and paying it forward. "You taught me," Shaq said into the microphone while still embracing his coach, "that the greatest victory isn't what you win for yourself. It's what you make possible for others to win. Tonight, we're making it possible for thousands of other young people to experience what you gave me, the gift of someone who refuses to give up on them." As the emotional embrace between Shaq and Coach Washington continued, something beautiful began happening throughout the arena. Players, coaches, celebrities, and fans started standing and applauding, not just for the moment they were witnessing, but in recognition of their own mentors who had believed in them. "I see you all standing," Shaq said, his voice still thick with emotion as he and Coach Washington separated. "And I know what you're thinking about. You're thinking about your own Coach Washington, the person who saw something in you when you couldn't see it in yourself." He was right. Throughout the arena, people were wiping tears from their eyes, many undoubtedly remembering teachers, coaches, family members, or friends who had played similar roles in their own lives. "That's the beautiful thing about what Coach Washington represents," Shaq continued. "His story isn't unique to basketball or even to sports. Every successful person has someone who believed in them when belief seemed impossible. Tonight is about celebrating all of those people." Coach Washington took the microphone again, his composure somewhat restored, but his voice still shaking with emotion. "Shaquille, this is overwhelming," he said, "but I need everyone here to understand something. What I did for Shaquille, I didn't do alone. I had mentors too, coaches and teachers who believed in me when I was a young man trying to figure out my purpose in life." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My high school basketball coach, Coach Johnson, saw potential in me not as a player, but as a leader. He encouraged me to pursue coaching when I was planning to go into business. My college professor, Dr. Williams, taught me that education isn't about filling minds with information. It's about lighting fires of curiosity and confidence. The truth is," Coach Washington continued, "none of us succeed alone. We all stand on the shoulders of people who invested in us, who believed in us, who refused to let us give up on ourselves." Shaq nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly right, Coach. And that's why tonight isn't just about honoring you. It's about inspiring everyone here to be a Coach Washington for someone else." The camera panned across the audience, showing faces that were clearly moved and contemplative. "I want to share something with all of you," Shaq said. "After I became successful in the NBA, I asked Coach Washington what I could do to repay him for what he'd done for me. Do you know what he said?" The arena waited in anticipation. He said, "Shaquille, you don't repay a mentor. You become one. Find a young person who needs what I gave you and give it to them. That's how this works. That's how we change the world. One person believing in another person, who then believes in another person." And that's exactly what Shaq has done, Coach Washington added, taking back the microphone. He's mentored dozens of young athletes, invested in education programs, created opportunities for people who might not have had them otherwise. He understood that success comes with responsibility. But it goes beyond formal mentorship, Shaq said. Every time you encourage someone who's struggling, every time you see potential in someone who's been written off, every time you refuse to give up on someone who's given up on themselves, you're being a Coach Washington. The emotion in the arena was building again as people realized they were being challenged to become mentors themselves. I want to tell you about one more person, Shaq said. Her name is Lisa Rodriguez, and she's here tonight. A spotlight found a young woman in her 20s, sitting in the crowd looking surprised to be identified. Lisa was a teenager in one of my youth basketball camps 5 years ago, Shaq explained. She was 16, from a single-parent household, struggling in school, and convinced that college wasn't for her. Sound familiar? The audience chuckled in recognition. I saw something in Lisa that reminded me of myself at that age. Potential wrapped in self-doubt. So I did for her what Coach Washington did for me. I believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. Lisa is now a junior at UCLA, studying social work, and she runs her own mentorship program for teenage girls in her community. She's created a cycle of mentorship that started with Coach Washington believing in an awkward teenager 35 years ago. Lisa stood and waved, tears in her eyes, as the crowd applauded. That, Shaq said, pointing toward Lisa, is what mentorship really looks like. It's not a one-time event. It's a chain of belief that connects generations. Coach Washington believed in me. I believed in Lisa. Lisa believes in the girls she mentors, and those girls will grow up to believe in others. Coach Washington was beaming with pride, clearly understanding that his influence had extended far beyond what he could have imagined. So tonight, Shaq continued, we're not just retiring a jersey or establishing a foundation. We're challenging every person in this arena, every person watching at home, to find their own Lisa Rodriguez, to find someone who needs what Coach Washington gave me, the gift of belief. Because here's what I've learned, Shaq said, his voice growing more passionate. Success isn't about how high you climb. It's about how many people you lift up with you. Coach Washington taught me that the real championship isn't the trophy you win for yourself. It's the potential you unlock in others. The arena was completely silent, absorbing the weight of this challenge. Before we officially retire number 34, Shaq said, I want everyone here to make a commitment. Look around you. Find someone, a young person, a struggling colleague, someone who's been counted out, and be their Coach Washington. Believe in them when they can't believe in themselves. Invest in their potential when others see only problems. The emotional crescendo was building as Shaq prepared for his final words about his mentor. Coach Washington, you saved more than my basketball career 35 years ago. You saved my belief in human kindness, in the power of one person to change another person's life, in the responsibility we all have to lift each other up. Tonight, as we celebrate what you made possible, we're also committing to making sure your legacy continues through every life you've touched, every person we mentor, every act of belief we extend to someone who needs it. As the ceremony reached its emotional peak, Shaq walked over to the microphone one final time, with Coach Washington standing proudly beside him. The arena, still buzzing with the energy of inspiration and challenge, waited for what they sensed would be the most meaningful part of the evening. Before we raise my jersey to the rafters, Shaq began, I want to tell you what's going to happen every time a young person looks up at number 34 hanging in this arena. He gestured toward the banner that would soon be displayed permanently above. The court. They're going to see more than just a number that represents basketball achievements. They're going to see a reminder that every success story starts with someone who refuses to give up on potential, even when that potential is hidden, even when that potential seems impossible. The crowd was completely engaged, understanding that they were witnessing something historically significant. Coach Washington, would you do me the honor of helping me unveil this banner? Together, the 78-year-old mentor and his former student, who had become one of basketball's greatest players, pulled the cord that revealed not just Shaq's retired number 34, but a smaller banner hanging beside it that read, Samuel Washington, builder of dreams, believer in potential. The arena erupted in the loudest ovation of the night, a sustained standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Coach Washington, overwhelmed by the honor, leaned heavily on his cane as tears streamed down his face. This banner, Shaq announced, when the crowd finally quieted, will hang here forever, reminding everyone who enters this arena that behind every great achievement is someone who believed when belief seemed impossible. But Shaq wasn't finished with his surprises. Coach Washington, there's one more thing. The Samuel Washington Foundation doesn't just start next year, it starts tonight. We've already identified the first 5 communities where we'll build youth development centers, and they'll all be named after you. He pulled out a piece of paper. The Samuel Washington Youth Development Center in Dallas, Texas, your hometown. The Samuel Washington Center in Detroit, Michigan. Centers in Philadelphia, Atlanta, and right here in Los Angeles. Coach Washington had to sit down in a chair that had been brought onto the court, emotionally overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being created in his name. But here's what makes me most proud, Shaq continued. Each of these centers will be run by young people who've been through mentorship programs themselves. People like Lisa Rodriguez, people who understand what it means to have someone believe in them and who are committed to passing that belief forward. The camera found Lisa in the crowd again, and she was openly weeping with joy and responsibility. "Ladies and gentlemen," Shaq said, his voice now strong with purpose and vision. "Tonight we're not just celebrating the past, we're building the future. We're creating a network of mentorship that will touch thousands of lives. All because one man refused to give up on an awkward teenager 35 years ago." As the ceremony began to wind down, something spontaneous and beautiful happened. One by one, people throughout the arena began standing and sharing brief stories of their own mentors. Teachers who had stayed after school to help them, coaches who had seen potential in them, family members who had never stopped believing. The arena became a chorus of gratitude, a celebration of all the Coach Washingtons who had shaped lives through belief and investment in others. "This is what mentorship really looks like," Shaq said, gesturing to the crowd sharing their stories. "It's not about famous people or dramatic gestures. It's about ordinary people doing extraordinary things by refusing to give up on someone else's potential." As the evening reached its conclusion, Shaq and Coach Washington stood together one final time at center court. "Coach," Shaq said, speaking into the microphone but looking directly at his mentor, 35 years ago, you told me that I could be great if I was willing to work for it. Tonight, I want to tell you something. You are great, not because of what you achieved for yourself, but because of what you made possible for others." The Samuel Washington Foundation will ensure that your approach to mentorship, seeing potential where others see problems, investing time in people rather than just teaching skills, believing in someone until they learn to believe in themselves, will continue touching lives long after both of us are gone. Coach Washington stood with difficulty and took the microphone one last time. "Shaquille," he said, his voice stronger now despite his tears. When I sat down next to you on those bleachers 35 years ago, I had no idea we were starting something that would lead to tonight. I just saw a young man who needed someone to believe in him. What you've created tonight, this foundation, these opportunities, this challenge for others to become mentors, this is beyond anything I could have imagined. But I'm not surprised, because this is who you've always been. Someone who understands that success is only meaningful when it's shared. He looked out at the crowd. To everyone here tonight, remember this. You don't have to be famous or wealthy to change someone's life. You just have to be willing to see potential where others see problems, and to invest your time and belief in helping that potential grow. Somewhere in your community, there's a young person sitting on bleachers, convinced they're not good enough, ready to give up on their dreams. Be their Coach Washington. Believe in them when they can't believe in themselves. That's how we change the world. One person, one moment of belief, one act of mentorship at a time. As the ceremony officially concluded and the crowd began to file out, many people lingered, unwilling to let go of the emotional power of what they had witnessed. They had come to see a jersey retirement, but they had experienced something much more profound. A master class in gratitude, mentorship, and the ripple effects of believing in human potential. 6 months later, the first Samuel Washington Youth Development Center opened in Dallas, with Coach Washington himself cutting the ribbon. The 78-year-old man who had spent his life quietly building up others was finally receiving the recognition he deserved. But more importantly, his approach to mentorship was being systematized and spread to help thousands more young people. Tattoo inscription above the entrance to each center read, "In honor of Coach Samuel Washington, who taught us that potential is everywhere, waiting for someone to believe in it." And below that, "Founded by Shaquille O'Neal, in gratitude for the gift of belief." This incredible story reminds us that behind every success is someone who believed when belief seemed impossible, and that our greatest responsibility is to become that person for someone else. If this story inspired you to think about mentoring someone in your own community, please take a moment to like this video. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about the power of believing in others, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they have the potential to change lives through mentorship. Remember, you don't need to be famous or wealthy to be someone's Coach Washington. You just need to be willing to see potential where others see problems and invest your time in helping that potential grow. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful journey of gratitude, belief, and paying it forward.